Hello and welcome to my channel Polyglot Reading. I'm David and here I usually talk about books that I have read in English, German, French, Italian or Yiddish. Today I would like to present you my 7 favorite non-fiction books of the past year. These are not new releases of 2023. Some of these books are more than 20, 30 or even 50 years old, but they are considered milestones in their field that are not obsolete or outdated, but still can be read with benefit and pleasure. Let's start with the books I read in English. The first one is The Madman's Library by Edward Brooke-Hitching. This is a stunning illustrated book about crazy and fascinating books, and I think anyone who loves libraries, beautiful books or weird books will love this volume. It's a presentation of the strangest and most bizarre books and manuscripts and literary curiosities ever produced. And it's written in a very engaging style that makes you really feel the author's passion for books, and the book is full with intriguing anecdotes and high-quality illustrations of the strangest bookish things you have ever seen. But it's not a chaotic jumble, far from it. There's a lot of material, but it's really nicely structured into well-thought-out chapters, each one substantiated by carefully selected and entertaining examples and illustrations. So there's that chapter on books made out of flesh and blood, cryptic books, literary hoaxes, religious oddities, toxic books, books of spectacular dimensions, and so on. This is nothing to read from the first to the last page in one go, but rather something to pick up from time to time to spend a pleasant hour in company of really interesting books. Second book, Green, The History of a Color by Michel Pastoureau. I could simply not believe that there was a book on the history of just one single color, but in fact this author has written several monographs on a number of colors, and I was fascinated by this almost crazy idea, and I enthusiastically read this book on the color of green. The book opens really completely new perspectives on everyday objects and topics, and one learns very interesting things from both a technical and historical point of view. Why are there so few green objects from antiquity? Why had it been so difficult for a long time to produce stable green dyes and pigments? And how has the symbolic meaning of the color green been changing over the past centuries? And so once you have read this book, you really see the world, and especially green objects, through very different eyes. The next book I read in English was The Copernican Revolution by Thomas Kuhn. So, how do scientific revolutions work? Thomas Kuhn goes down that rabbit hole by using the Copernican revolution just an example to show that just a single coincidence and a single genius or mad scientist are not enough, but certain conditions must exist for scientists to deal with topics that lead to revolutionary discoveries, and also for unusual results and findings to be heard and widely recognized in the scientific field, up to a point where they are really accepted and lead to a revolution or a paradigm shift. So while explaining these mechanisms and conditions, using the example of Copernicus and Galileo and their discoveries, the book goes much further and explains these mechanisms in a universal way. And it's worth reading for anyone who wants to know how scientific progress works and how it doesn't work. The next book, The Pursuit of the Millennium by Norman Cohn, is a book originally written in English. I read the German translation just because I could get hold of it much quicker and easier than the English original. So that book deals with a couple of very interesting questions. So, what are the social-cultural conditions and mechanisms that trigger apocalyptic movements and make them so attractive for many people? What apocalyptic movements have there been in the past, and what can be learned from analyzing them in depth? And what makes doomsday sects so attractive for certain people, and how do these sects and their set of beliefs work and make some societies spiral down into more seclusion and even into so fatal events like mass suicides? The book fascinated me for a sort of personal reason, because I grew up in an environment where I came into contact with several people who were strongly influenced by the Christian variant of apocalyptic thinking. People whose favorite pastime was to try to interpret the biblical book of Revelation, and who were fully convinced that this is in no way a metaphorical book with an allegorical meaning, but that the real apocalypse was just around the corner. And so I knew, when I grew up, I knew grown-up people spending a huge amount of their time on speculation about who is going to be the Antichrist and when are we all going to get the symbol of the beast tattooed on our foreheads and our right hand, and people looking for the number 666 hidden in barcodes and so on, and fighting whether true Christians should prepare for going underground or rather trust in being saved by a divine act of rapture. I'm not making this up. I think religious groups like this do still exist today. And this is not an exclusive feature of a certain type of Christianity. We see similar sorts of so-called millennial movements also in other cultures and religions. And I have always felt an ambiguous mixture of revulsion and fascination towards these ideas. And I wanted to better understand their history and more the general social cultural background and conditions and mechanisms, and also the psychological basis of these movements. And when looking for some academic work on this topic, I came across Norman Cohn as one of the most learned and most active scholar on these topics in the 1960s and 70s and 80s. And so this book is considered sort of a milestone of research on that topic. And I read it with great interest. And I think I exactly found what I was looking for in that book. The next book is a book I read in French, L'incroyable histoire de la littérature française, so the incredible history of French literature, written as a comic. And I have already presented this stunning book in my video on the University Tech. It's an extraordinary history of French literature. In the book, there are 35 chapters on the most famous writers of the French language, and each chapter has approximately 10 pages, which tell the life, the educational experiences, formative events, and also the themes and ideas of these authors and their masterpieces in a very captivating and highly entertaining way. This is an optimal way to familiarize yourself with French authors. And the single flaw is that my favorite French author, Théophile Gautier, is missing, but there is no perfect book. C'est la vie. Let's move on to Italian. Unfortunately, the two non-fiction books I read in Italian are most likely not available in English translation, but I like to present them anyway. Maybe there are some Italian speakers among you anyway. So the one is a book by Massimo Polidoro, Il mondo sotto sopra, meaning the world upside down. It is about the need for rational and critical thinking as an important antidote to the current situation that we are flooded by news and so-called facts that are either deliberately distorted or just fake, or quackeries or conspiracy theories. And Massimo Polidoro was a reader of scientific methodology and the psychology of the unusual at the University of Milano. And now he teaches science methodology. Now he teaches science communication at the University of Padua in Italy. And he is an excellent science communicator himself, especially he is very great at explaining the scientific approach, how to debunk lies or how to unmask pseudoscientific claims such as alleged ghost observations, medical quackery, conspiracy theories, and so on. This book is definitely suitable also for readers without any scientific background and training, just because it explains in a very clear and entertaining way how the critical approach and the scientific method, how they work and why they are so powerful. And it also gives some hands-on examples how to use it correctly to investigate anomalous effects or extraordinary claims in a systematic way to get as close to the truth as possible. It also explains how the dark side of the force works, how facts and news are distorted by various people, and what mechanisms are used, and what are helpful indicators for how to recognize fake news and false facts. A book that offers a good guide to critical and independent thinking, and which is much needed in the current world situation. Massimo Polidoro has also created a YouTube channel that I've been following for more than 2 years, and I put the link in the description. Last but not least, final book, Alessandro Barbero, Il divano di Istanbul. Like Massimo Polidoro, Professor Alessandro Barbero is also a very talented science communicator. He is one of the most famous and most prolific Italian professors of history. He has written many books on various historical topics. Some of them have been translated into English, this one unfortunately not. He has also written a historical novel that won one of the most prestigious literature prizes in Italy. But this book is a very short but informative book on the history of the the Ottoman Empire. In my time at school, which is, by the way, 40 years ago, we learned almost nothing about the Oriental history, about the Ottoman Empire or Turkey, and we had a very strong bias towards the Central European history. And from what I noticed when my kids went to school, things had not changed significantly. And this is a real shame. It's almost outrageous because, in particular in this part of Germany where I live in, I think at least 10% of the population are of Turkish origin. So they are rooted in that Ottoman or Osman Empire. And we know next to nothing about their history. And anyway, I wanted to fill that gap a little bit by using this book, and I can recommend this book or any book on history topics written by Alessandro Barbero to anyone who learns still a little bit about history in a really entertaining way, and by somebody who is really extremely gifted in explaining things by use of very strong narrative powers. Also, Alessandro Barbero has a YouTube channel where he's talking about a huge variety of historical topics, also always in a very entertaining way. I will leave the channel in the description box below. Okay, so we have reached the end of this video. I hope you like it. If so, give me a like, or more important, leave me a comment. I would love to enter into a discussion with you. Take care. See you next time. Ciao.